If you've ever had your life implode in one afternoon, you'll understand what I felt that day. 3 hours before my wedding, I was standing in front of a mirror, trying to steady my hands as my best man fixed my tie. My phone buzzed. I thought it was Sophie, maybe sending a nervous "I love you" before walking down the aisle. But it wasn't that. Her voice was quiet, trembling, the kind of tone that tells you before the words even come that something is wrong. "Adam," she said. "I can't do this." For a few seconds, I thought she meant she was late or forgot something. Then she said it again, slower, final. "I can't marry you." I laughed, because what else could I do? "You're kidding, right? Sophie, everyone's already." "I'm sorry." And then the line went dead. I called back. Again and again. Straight to voicemail. In less than 15 minutes, I went from a man about to say, "I do," to a man everyone pitied. The caterers whispered. My mother cried. My father stood by the window, saying nothing, just clenching and unclenching his jaw. I remember the sound of chairs being folded, the scent of flowers that suddenly made me sick. By the time the guests started leaving, Sophie had vanished. No note, no explanation. Her apartment was empty. Her phone was turned off. I spent weeks trying to make sense of it. We'd been together for 3 years, 3 years of laughter, plans, late-night talks about kids and houses and trips to Italy we never took. There hadn't been a fight, no coldness, nothing. Just a phone call and a void. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd been too focused on work, too absent. Maybe she'd found someone else. But I needed answers, and she'd left none. I called her friends, her sister, all claimed they didn't know. One even hung up on me. The humiliation festered. I couldn't bear to stay in the same office where everyone knew. My boss, Patrick Gray, was polite about it, in that smug, managerial way that feels more like a performance than sympathy. "Take the time you need, Adam," he said. "Just remember, work will help you heal." Patrick was the kind of man who could make people feel small without raising his voice. Charming, confident, always with a perfect suit and a practiced smile. I'd once admired him. After that day, I couldn't stand being near him. 2 months later, I quit. I joined a small tech startup, low pay, high hours, but it gave me something to focus on other than my own bitterness. Slowly, I started to breathe again. I deleted Sophie's number, boxed up her photos, tried to move on. And for a while, I thought I had. Then, one night, about 6 months after that call, I was scrolling through social media. It was one of those sleepless nights where you look for distraction and end up finding pain instead. That's when I saw it. A photo tagged by someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Sophie's best friend, Emily. She'd posted pictures from a wedding at a vineyard in Napa Valley. I almost scrolled past until I saw the caption. "Congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Gray, a day to remember." I froze. There, standing at the altar, was Patrick Gray. Next to him, wearing a dress I didn't recognize but a smile I could never forget, was Sophie. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. The room seemed to shrink, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. At first, I thought it had to be a coincidence, another Patrick Gray, maybe. But then I looked closer. It was him. My ex-boss. The man who'd given me time to heal. Every nerve in my body burned. I felt sick. Betrayed. Mocked. I zoomed in on the photo, the way his hand rested possessively on her waist, the way she looked at him like I'd never existed. There were dozens of pictures. The rehearsal dinner. The first dance. The honeymoon in Santorini. All perfectly curated, as if to erase any trace of the life she'd left behind. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell face down, screen cracked. But the damage wasn't to the phone. It was to me. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. I kept replaying everything, the work nights Patrick had told me to stay late, the business trips he'd sent me on, the times he'd asked about Sophie with that easy smile. Had it started then? Was she seeing him behind my back, even as we planned our wedding? I wanted to tell myself no, that she wasn't that cruel, that he wasn't that twisted. But the evidence said otherwise. I was angry at her. Angry at him. Angry at myself for not seeing it. But beneath the rage, something colder began to grow, an idea. Patrick thought he'd won. He had the company, the money, and now the woman I once loved. He'd taken everything, my pride, my trust, my future. But he'd underestimated me. He'd forgotten that I knew his world inside and out, his habits, his business practices, his secrets. And for the first time since that phone call, I felt something close to clarity. I wasn't going to beg for explanations anymore. I wasn't going to drown in heartbreak or humiliation. I was going to make sure Patrick Gray lost everything, the way I had. And when he did, I'd be the one watching. The morning after I saw those wedding photos, I went to work and let everyone think I was fine. I answered emails. I sat through meetings. I smiled when someone asked if I was okay. Inside, I was hollow, all edges, nothing soft. For days I replayed that picture in my head, Sophie in a dress I'd never seen, Patrick's hand on her back like a claim. The images crawled under my skin and wouldn't leave. I felt betrayed, stupid, small. But under that hurt something colder grew, not a wild, shouting anger, but a slow, steady calculation. I started poking around the life Patrick had built around himself. It wasn't hard to follow, people liked to leave digital breadcrumbs. Friends, clients, charity galas, everything was on display if you knew where to look. At first I was just looking for proof that the photo wasn't a sick joke. Then I started noticing things that didn't add up. There were small slips, the kinds of things you only see if you used to be part of the machine. An expense that didn't make sense, a vendor nobody could verify, a client story that changed depending on who was telling it. Little things that, alone, could be shrugged off. Together, they felt like a pattern of shortcuts and hushes. I made a folder on my laptop and started saving screenshots and copies of things that felt wrong. I saved emails where Patrick praised someone who later disappeared. I saved announcements that were oddly timed. I even dug up a stray photo of a bracelet, the same one I'd once seen on his desk during a late night at the office. The more I collected, the clearer it looked. The man who'd smiled at my wedding disaster had been building a life that wasn't entirely clean. Then Ben messaged me, an old colleague who'd left Patrick's firm quietly a year before all this. He didn't offer gossip. He offered a wary kind of help. There were always weird ways of doing things, he said. You don't notice it when you're in the weeds. But it's there. That was enough to light me up. I'd been angry and hurting, but Ben's words made my anger useful. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to scream at Sophie or show up at Patrick's house. I wanted something bigger, a way to take away the pedestal Patrick stood on, to make him answer for whatever corners he'd cut. So I wrote to a reporter. I didn't use my real name. I made a fake email, a burner phone number, and a very short message. I have documents that show things done the wrong way at Patrick Gray's firm. Are you interested? I wasn't ready for pity. I was ready for someone who could make people pay attention. She replied fast. Send what you have, she wrote. Her name was Mara, and her messages were practical, not dramatic. That felt right. I sent her the folder, not some neat legal brief, just a messy pile of files, receipts, and odd messages that together painted a picture. I annotated what I could, like drawing arrows on a map. While the journalist looked through what I'd sent, I kept watching Sophie from a distance. It felt awful to admit, but I tracked public posts and photos, the kind of thing people share to prove they're happy. One picture stopped me cold, Sophie in a sunlit kitchen, her wrist catching the light where a heavy bracelet gleamed. I knew that bracelet. I'd seen it on Patrick's desk during an overtime night months before. The image made my stomach drop. It wasn't proof of everything, but it was another thread. Collecting the pieces changed me. I went from being the devastated fiancé to someone with a purpose. I slept less. I read more. I learned to look for small inconsistencies that signaled a bigger lie. Revenge stopped feeling like a word and started feeling like work, quiet, methodical, and precise. Still, there were moments when the plan felt wrong in a deeper way. What if Sophie had reasons I didn't understand? What if the truth wasn't betrayal but something worse, fear, blackmail, a choice made under pressure? I tried to imagine every scenario and failed to find peace in any of them. That doubt was a nagging thing at the back of my mind, but it didn't stop me. It only made me more careful. When Mara wrote back, it was short and clinical, "We're on it." No fireworks, no promises, just those 3 words, and the tiny electric thrill of knowing I'd set something in motion that could not be easily stopped. That night I sat on the roof of my apartment building and looked out at the city. The skyline was the same as it had always been, glass and lights and other people with their own disasters. I thought about how life had been before Sophie's call, simple, naive. I thought about how easy it had been to believe the world was fair. I thought about Patrick, smiling at my humiliation like it was a private joke, and about Sophie, who had disappeared without an answer. I thought about the strange steadiness of the plan I'd started. If revenge was a poison, I had already swallowed it. If it was justice, I told myself I'd find out soon enough. Either way, I had stopped being the man who'd been left at the altar. I was someone else now, someone who would not be ignored. Revenge isn't fire. It's ice. You have to let it freeze everything first, the fear, the pity, the grief, until all that's left is precision. By the time winter rolled around, I had that precision. Patrick Gray was still smiling in glossy business magazines, giving interviews about leadership and ethical innovation. Sophie stood beside him in photos, polished, beautiful, pregnant. Each image was a twist of the knife, but I'd stopped bleeding. Now, I was waiting. I found out through a contact that Patrick's firm was expanding. A new deal, a merger, something that would make him richer than ever. That's when I decided to move from quiet observation to contact. We bumped into each other at a networking event downtown. I'd shaved, put on my best suit, and made sure to look like the picture of success. Patrick's face flickered, a second of surprise, then his usual polished grin. "Adam. It's been ages." "Yeah," I said. "Heard your company's been busy." He chuckled. "Always. You know how it is. Work never stops." He looked smug, the kind of man who believes he's untouchable. I noticed the faint gold band on his finger. A new one. We talked politely. He bragged about his deals, his house, his new family. I smiled and nodded, the perfect audience. Before leaving, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Come by the office sometime," he said. "Maybe we'll do business again." That was the invitation I needed. 2 weeks later, I did just that. I arrived with a portfolio under my arm, fake consultancy material I'd put together to make it look like I was part of a small firm specializing in logistics optimization. Patrick bought it instantly. He'd always liked to be flattered, and I knew how to speak his language. We talked for an hour in his sleek office, full of glass, awards, and ego. I let him brag. He told me about an upcoming acquisition, how it was going to cement his legacy. He didn't notice that I was steering the conversation, planting subtle suggestions about a promising partner company I'd worked with before. The company didn't exist. I'd built a fake online profile for it, complete with a few forged testimonials and photos stolen from stock images. Patrick's firm had always moved fast on shiny opportunities. Greed made him sloppy. By the time I left his office, he'd promised to have his people look into it. I walked out with the calm satisfaction of a chess player who'd just positioned a queen. Days turned into weeks. I didn't have to do much, Patrick did it all himself. His team reached out to my fake partner company, exchanged emails, and even started preliminary talks. I kept the tone professional, just enough to hook him deeper. Then, almost on cue, Mara, the journalist, struck. Her article dropped on a Wednesday morning. The headline was impossible to miss. Insider claims misconduct at Gray & Partners, inflated projects, phantom vendors, and financial irregularities. It exploded online within hours. Patrick's smiling face, next to the word fraud, was everywhere. His investors panicked. His clients froze their deals. His board demanded explanations. I watched it all unfold like a live performance, every update, every angry comment, every denial he gave to the press. And I wasn't done. While the media tore into his company, I sent one more anonymous envelope, this time to Sophie. No threats, no cruelty. Just screenshots of Patrick's old emails to his ex-wife. In them, he wrote things like, "She thinks I filed the papers. She doesn't need to know the truth." The truth being, he'd never legally divorced her. Their marriage, the one that had humiliated me, was invalid. 2 days later, another photo appeared online, Sophie leaving their house, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, Patrick shouting at someone by the gate. The caption under it read, "Gray's personal life in turmoil amid scandal." For the first time in almost a year, I felt something close to peace. The man who'd destroyed me was crumbling in front of the world. The woman who'd abandoned me had seen who he really was. And I hadn't lifted a finger in anger, just patience and precision. But the night the news showed Patrick being escorted out of his office by federal agents, something strange happened. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. I stared at the screen, expecting to feel that rush of justice, that intoxicating sense of finally. But there was nothing. Just a hollow quiet. Patrick was finished. His company collapsed. Sophie vanished from the internet, and the world moved on. Everyone got what they deserved. At least, that's what I told myself. Until one evening, months later, a plain envelope arrived at my door. No name, no address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in familiar handwriting. "Sophie's," it said. "You got what you wanted, Adam. But did you ever wonder why I left you that day?" My hands went cold as I read it again. There was something underneath those words, a story I hadn't heard, a truth I hadn't considered. And for the first time since the wedding that never happened, I realized something terrifying. Maybe I destroyed the wrong person. I must have read that letter 100 times before the words started to blur. You got what you wanted, Adam. But did you ever wonder why I left you that day? No signature. No return address. Just the handwriting I knew by heart. For days I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was manipulation, some twisted attempt at sympathy after everything that had happened. But the question dug deeper every night until I couldn't sleep without hearing it. Why had she left? What could have been so bad that she'd vanish hours before our wedding? I couldn't move on without knowing. So I did what I'd promised myself I wouldn't, I looked for her. It took weeks. She'd erased herself from everything, no social media, no phone listings, no trace in the city. Then one morning, while scrolling through a local art directory for something unrelated, I saw her name. Sophie Caldwell, gallery owner, Blue Harbor, Maine. A small coastal town, population barely 4,000. Quiet. Peaceful. Hidden. I booked a flight the next day. When I arrived, the town felt like another world, all wind and salt and stillness. The gallery was small, tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. Through the window, I saw her before she saw me. Her hair was shorter now, her posture softer, but she looked healthy, free, in a way she never had before. I almost left. Part of me thought seeing her alive and okay was enough. But then she looked up and our eyes met through the glass. Her expression froze, then shifted to something unreadable. She stepped outside, arms folded against the wind. Adam. Her voice was calm, tired. Not scared, just resigned. I got your letter, I said. You said there was something I didn't know. She hesitated, then nodded toward the beach behind the gallery. Walk with me. The sand was cold and soft beneath our shoes. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she stopped and turned to face the ocean. Patrick threatened me, she said simply. I didn't answer. I just stared, waiting for more. He came to see me 2 months before the wedding, she continued. Said he'd found something. Videos from years ago. Stuff from college I didn't even know existed. He said if I didn't leave you, he'd release them online. He had copies, Adam. My ex had sold them, and Patrick somehow got hold of them. Her voice shook for the first time. He said he'd ruin me, and you. That he'd make sure you lost your job, that your reputation would burn too. He said the company couldn't afford a scandal involving one of its employees' fiancés. I felt the world tilt. You're saying he blackmailed you into marrying him? She nodded. He said if I agreed, he'd make sure everything disappeared. He'd protect me, protect you. He said I didn't have a choice. I tried to speak, but no words came. My throat burned. I wanted to tell you, she said softly. I even went to your apartment that morning. But you weren't there. You were already at the venue. I couldn't face you. I thought, maybe if I just disappeared, it would hurt less than explaining. Patrick showed up right after I left. He made me pack a bag and leave the city. She looked down. He promised he'd keep the videos buried forever. He said he just wanted a quiet marriage, a trophy wife, nothing more. But it was a lie. He controlled everything, what I wore, where I went, who I spoke to. He made me delete everyone from my life. I thought if I played along long enough, I'd find a way out. The wind whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't move to brush it away. And then one morning, I saw the article. About his company. About the investigation. I knew it was you. I knew you'd done it. Her eyes met mine then, not angry, not pleading, just full of something raw. You destroyed him. And in a way, you saved me. You ended it. I didn't know what to say. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 ways, shouting, blaming, closure, but not this. Not guilt. I thought you chose him, I said quietly. I never did, she whispered. He chose for me. We stood there in silence, waves crashing behind us. The world felt both heavier and lighter. Finally, she said, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth before you start hating yourself for what happened. What you did, it freed me. Even if you didn't mean to. I stared at the horizon, where the sea swallowed the sky. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. Just tired. Are you happy now? I asked. She smiled faintly. I'm getting there. I nodded. Good. We walked back to the gallery without another word. She stopped at the door and looked at me. Take care of yourself, Adam. You too, I said. And then she went inside, disappearing into the quiet hum of her new life. I stood there for a long time, listening to the waves and the sound of my own breath. The wind felt colder now, but cleaner. As I turned to leave, I realized something simple and strange. Revenge had never been the end. It had only been the road that led me back to the truth, to her truth, to mine. Sophie had broken me to protect me. I had destroyed Patrick to avenge her. Maybe love doesn't always survive. But sometimes, it leaves behind something else, understanding, forgiveness, or maybe just peace. That night, before I left Blue Harbor, I sat by the water and wrote in my notebook, the one I'd started months earlier when the pain was still fresh. I wrote a single line to close it all. She broke me to save me. I destroyed him to save her. In the end, we both lost what we loved, but gained what we needed, the truth. Then I closed the book, left it on the bench overlooking the sea, and walked away without looking back. The waves kept their secrets. And so did I.